Welcome everyone. We've got a portion this week. Is the longest portion of the entire Torah. Can you believe it? 176 verses. And incidentally, the longest Gemara in the whole Talmud for Basra is 176 pages. And incidentally, the longest chapter of Tehillim is Psalm 119. And it also has, guess, 176 verses. So we have 176 verses, a lot of it's repetition, which we're going to discuss as we go through the shiur. We're going to begin with a summary, and then we're going to stop on some very vital issues. We've spoken about temporary insanity. Let's get there. So the portion begins by dealing with the second of three families of Leviim. There were three families, Kahos, Gershon, and Merari. Kahos was dealt with last week, towards the end of the portion, where a section of last week's portion dealt with what exactly Kahos did when the Jewish people moved from place to place in the desert. They had to move the whole sanctuary. So this family of Kahos, a subset of the tribe of Levi, they would carry the implements, the holy ark, the holy table, the menorah, which had previously been covered by the Kohanim, and then they would carry that as they would go. This week's portion begins with the second of three families, which is Gershon, and they would carry all of the tapestries, veils, and coverings. That is what Gershon carried. There were many, many curtains and veils and coverings. And finally, Merari, the third of the three families that made up the tribe of Levi, they carry the beams, the boards, the pillars, so that all the construction elements that define the space of the Mishkan. Then it speaks about the numbers of each of these families, a total of 8,580 men ready to do Mishkan service. Hashem's presence fills the Mishkan, and those who were impure had to leave. Now, we change subject, and it speaks about stolen property. If a person stole property and then swore that he didn't, and then wants to resolve things, not only does he have to obviously pay back what he owes. Obviously, when you do teshuvah, you can't say, Hashem, I really feel bad about what I stole from Chaim, and I feel sorry, and I knock my chest, and I'm thank you, Hashem, now you forgive me. Obviously, essential to that process of rectifying this iniquity is to return the value that one stole. But here, once he has denied, sworn falsely, not only does he have to return the 100 rand, he has to add a surcharge of a fifth. That's a tax. That's a punitive penalty payment. Then it speaks about a situation where there's no heirs whatsoever. A Jew dies and there's not one person to inherit the person. I've put in brackets here. That is the convert. Because which Jew doesn't have a relative? Everyone says if there's a will, there's a relative. Of course there's a relative. Every Jew has a relative. We have children. If we don't have children, we have a brother, we have a sister. If we don't, then it goes back to parents. If they're not alive, then it goes across to their sisters and down the other side, cousins. Somebody is related to this person. How can it be that the Torah talks about a person who has no heirs whatsoever, not one person to inherit from him or her? And the answer is that it's a convert. A convert might have biological parents, but doesn't have official, legal, halachic relatives. So in that case, if you have to return a stolen item, it goes to the kohen, because there's nobody to return it to if he passed away. Then it speaks about verbal confession. We all know on Yom Kippur, we have a lot of al-chet shechatanu, to express and enunciate and actually say what it is that we've done wrong. Very important communicative tool with people as well is to actually say the words, I'm sorry, but to Hashem too. Then it speaks about the gift to the Kohen, which can be given to the Kohen of your own choice. We're learning the Talmud every morning now, and we're actually learning about Terumah. Terumah is the first gift, 1/50th. If a person was more generous, a 40th, less generous, a 60th, but approximately 2% would be given to the Kohen, the first of the gifts of one's produce. You don't have a specific Kohen that you have to give it to. So no Kohen can come to you and say, I demand that you hand over your terumah, because you can choose which Kohen you want to give it to. You have to give it to a Kohen. Full stop. Change subjects completely, and this is going to be the subject of our shir in depth. We then learn about the Soita woman. Whoa, what a strange passage in the Torah. It talks about a husband who suspects his wife of committing adultery. He warns his wife, do not be alone with this and this man, because I suspect that there's something going on which is undermining our marriage. She, notwithstanding his warning, she is alone with such a man, and there are no witnesses as to what happened. So there is a problem because she was not loyal and true to the marriage in respecting the concern that there might be another man involved, and she went and she was spending time secretly with this man. We don't know if she's guilty or not. Comes the Torah and says there's a potion that is prepared, and this tests the innocence of the man and the woman, not only the woman at hand, but the man that she was alone with also is going to be affected by the result of this test. What is the potion made of? The name of Hashem is written on a parchment. It is then dissolved in water. There's earth taken from the floor of the Beis Hamikdash, and then a whole potion is taken, and she is given this potion to drink. They try desperately to tell her not to do this. If she's guilty, to own up, but she says she's innocent. So she drinks the potion. If she's guilty, she dies, and the man with whom she consorted dies instantly. And if she is innocent, and now she's had to have this potion administered, she is now blessed with abundant blessing. Rashi says if the children that she was giving birth to are unhealthy, she's now going to have healthy children. All kinds of promises that for her trouble, for all that she's been through, the potion which would have killed her if she was guilty is a source of abundant blessing. Change subjects. We'll see the connection to the next section. It talks about a Nazir. A Nazir, a Nazirite, is somebody who says, Hashem, you've given me 613 commandments. I'm concerned about my allegiance to you. I want to take on a vow of abstinence. Beyond all the 613 commandments, I want to assume added sanctity, holiness commitment. So the specific elements of this person's newfound limitations relate to partaking of the grape and any product of the grape, the vine, the wine. He's not allowed to drink wine. He must let his hair grow long, no cutting of the hair. And in very similar way that a Kohen is not allowed to come into contact with the dead, he assumes this new higher level of requirement of not coming into contact with the dead. How long is it? Well, he could determine. He could say, I'm taking a vow of abstinence of Nazir, this oath for 30 days, for 60 days, for a year, for a lifetime. He could do that. If it didn't say a time, then the minimum amount is 30 days. At the conclusion, interestingly, the Nazir brings a korban, a sacrifice offering, and the commentaries, hopefully we'll get there if there's enough time, speak about the fact that there is something, a sacrifice normally brought when a person did something wrong. So what did he do wrong? He was, after all, taking on such added degrees of holiness. So when Hashem gives us the recipe, we should be very careful not to add on additional prohibitions and restrictions. That's not the recipe that Hashem gave us. So for denying himself the bounty of this world, for example, wine in moderation, so he is now bringing a sacrifice almost to ask forgiveness that he's been through this whole ordeal. Full stop. The Kohanim, next subject, are commanded to bless Bnei Yisrael. It's in this week's portion. We're all aware of the blessings. When we stand in front of the Kohanim, Kohanim, they say the bracha, Yevarechecha Hashem, right? Those words in this week's portion. Threefold blessing. I will bless you, says Hashem, and I will guard you, and I'll cause my countenance to shine on you, and I'll give you shalom. I'll give you peace. These are the words commanded in this week's portion for the Kohanim to use these words to bless the Jewish people. Full stop. Change subjects. Now we're going to dedicate the Mishkan, which means that on the 1st of Nisan of the second year since the Exodus, so it means just slightly less than a year after they left Egypt. They left Egypt on the 15th of Nisan. A year later, on the 1st of Nisan, everything was already formed to be part of the Mishkan, of the sanctuary. Now, each leader of a tribe came forward. The prince of each tribe contributes the gifts for the Mishkan, and the Torah dedicates a paragraph to each of these 12 tribal leaders. On the first day, Nachshon ben Aminadav from the tribe of Judah came forward, and he donated so many spoons, so many this, so much of that, so much of that, so much gold. And it tells a whole list of exactly what he dedicated. Now, what's interesting is the next paragraph says on the second day, it was the second prince of the next tribe came forward, and he gave. What did he give? He gave exactly the same, ditto, not word perfect, exactly the same as the previous prince. And guess the third prince leader does the same. Fourth, fifth, 12th. Every single prince leader gives exactly the same amount. And strangely, the Torah doesn't just say the following items were presented by each of the tribes through their prince, through their tribal leader. We've saved a lot of script in the Torah, and this week's portion would have been less than 176 verses. It wouldn't have been the longest portion in the Torah. Yet the Torah dedicates a whole paragraph to repeat again and again and again. We actually read this over Hanukkah time, these verses, and that becomes a question that hopefully we'll have time to answer as well. Why doesn't the Torah write it in its normally preferred method of being short and to the point, and not dedicating any extra words than required? Why over here do we repeat the same paragraph again and again, each time in association with the next prince of the next tribe who dedicated the same things? Finally, the portion finishes and says, after they had made all these dedications, the sanctuary was ready to start being used, and Hashem spoke to Moshe Rabbeinu from where? From the two cherubim on top of the ark. Remember the pictures that we saw? That on top of the ark, which is made of wood and gold, there was a slab of gold that had two angelical figurines with their wings spread outwards, facing one another, and the voice of Hashem was heard by Moshe Rabbeinu from between those wings of those two figurines. So there's a lot of detail that's happening in this week's portion. Let's see if we can get through some of the messages. Let's begin with this woman that goes astray. It's a very strange situation. We don't know how many times, if ever, it was enacted. It's a law of the Torah, but the Talmud takes it way beyond the simple meaning relating to a husband and a wife, in which we've explained the husband was jealous of the wife, warns the wife not to be alone with a certain man. She is alone with this person, and the word that is used to describe her is soite. See, soita there's a whole tractate of Talmud called Sota, the Sota woman. And the word Sota can mean to turn aside, says Rashi. Why is she called the Sota woman? Because she deviated. She turned away from what should be the appropriate standards and levels of loyalty in marriage by just being alone with this man when she was asked not to. So the Sota means to turn aside. But the word Sota is spelled exactly the same word as the Hebrew word for foolish. To say a harsh word, stupid. The Hebrew word for an idiot is ashoite in Yiddish. Mizoktaf Yiddish as ashoite. It's a Hebrew word. He is a fool. So we say embedded in this word, Sota, which means the wife that turned away from her husband, is the connotation of the word, which means foolish, a fool. And the Gemara then expands on this whole incident of the Torah and sees it as an analogy of a much broader marriage, the marriage between Hashem and our people. And the Gemara says, why is she called a foolish woman? Because in this moment, she got caught up emotionally, and she, in fact, is the prototype or the example of anyone who comes to sin. Any wife that is being disloyal to her husband, and every Jew who's being disloyal to Hashem. Hashem warned us. He said, don't get involved with strange things. And then we go ahead and we do it. So it's an analogy beyond its simple real meaning that we have to understand it as. It's an analogy for any form of sin. And the Gemara says, a person does not sin unless a spirit of folly enters into him or her. That moment, the person is acting out of emotion and therefore, in a sense, is temporarily insane. They've got a condition that is, they've lost their marbles. Now, let's just see what the Gemara means, because we're not talking about a guy who's now going to have an IQ test and there's a problem with his IQ or her IQ. We're not talking about the person looks like a meshugana. Then we know the person's meshugana or a fool. The guy looks normal. He's like one of us. He is me. But the Gemara is saying that when we turn away from Hashem, there is an element of temporary insanity. What we mean is that if we would evaluate every aspect and detail surrounding what is now the deviation from Hashem's will, and we would evaluate it like a person does, like we encourage a person who's in a dilemma. I'm not sure if I should sell or buy. I'm not sure if I should emigrate. I'm not sure if I should buy a new business. I'm not sure if I should stay in this shul or that shul, whatever the question is at hand. You would normally advise the person, take a piece of paper, write down your pros, write down your cons, write down why it is a good idea, why it's not a good idea, and then weigh up in a moment of objective evaluation, weigh up and see what is the recipe for happiness in your life. It takes a lot of objectivity and it takes a lot of technical removing oneself from all of the emotions to deal with the issues. Now imagine, let's go back to the original sin. What was the first sin that took place in the world? Hashem said to Adam and to Chava, do not eat from the tree that is forbidden from you. You're not allowed to eat from the Eitz Hadas, the tree of knowledge. All other trees you can eat from, just not this tree. So now Chava comes to her husband and says, why don't you eat from this tree, the fruit of this tree? And she uses very emotive language. She says, Tov ha'etz lama'achal. This fruit is delicious. It is lush, gorgeous. You cannot believe how delicious this fruit is. Everything about the power of persuasion relates to the emotion. Now imagine, just let's go back to Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. If at that point, somebody, wasn't anybody, it was only Adam and Eve, somebody tapped Adam on the shoulder and said, Adam, put it all on paper, make a list. What are the pros and cons? On the one hand, you stand to have a delicious apple, which will tantalize your taste buds for the next 4 minutes. But what is going to be the result of this is you will lose the Garden of Eden. You're going to be working for the rest of your life with painstaking labor. Your wife is going to land up having suffering in childbirth. Death is going to come to the world. It's going to take thousands of years with misery and pain in Golus that is going to affect generations and generations of your children. Until eventually Mashiach comes and brings us back to the garden. So weigh it up. This is the pro, this is the con, put it all on paper, and then work out what do you want to do. Imagine if that had been the moment of analysis, objective, theoretical, mind-involved analysis of what was at hand. Would Adam Arishan have sinned? Not a chance. Never. He would have weighed up and seen what do I gain and what is the pain. And for sure he wouldn't choose the limited temporary gain which was going to come at the expense of so much pain. He would never have done it. So that's what we mean. The person would never sin. Not one of us would sin against Hashem unless the spirit of folly enters into us. It's not that we lost our IQ, but we've lost our rational, objective decision-making in what is appropriate or not. And we give up so much for so little when we turn away from Hashem. So we'll sleep another 5 minutes and then we're going to miss shul or we'll miss the minyan. So we won't go to the shir because it's cold. We got reasons to explain, but at the end, what we lose is much, much more than we gain. So we have lost. This is a state of temporary insanity. We are caught up in the emotion. And yes, look at the modern day snake that came to them in the Garden of Eden, telling them how beautiful and how lush and how gorgeous. And tovahi le'inayim, it is so tempting for the eyes. Look at it, it's delicious. What's the modern day snake in our lives? Advertising. How does advertising work? Catch you on the emotion, make you feel like you're going to suddenly feel young or feel rich or feel whatever. And Marlboro or Rothman's cigarettes from Pall Mall to Upper. Remember those advertisements with guys going on the chairlifts and the ski lifts and the life of fun and excitement and racing cars, all of those images that came with the cigarettes. The advertisement, only because they have to, adds a few lines on the cigarette box that says that this is dangerous to your health. But imagine if on the billboard they'd say, associated with a very fancy car or the Marlboro horse. On the other hand, this is the image of a guy dying of cancer in a hospital. The advertisements don't do that. They don't want you to think. They don't want you to evaluate and say, what are the pros and cons so that I can work out what is the most beneficial next step. They don't want you to think. They want you to lose your mind, get caught up in the emotion. We get so caught up and so excited before we know it, we're doing something and buying something that we don't need. That is the spirit of folly. Doesn't mean that we're fools. We could be very, very intelligent human beings, but we lose our objective power of analysis. And even if this is the only thing we take out of the shir, because we should have a shortened shir. Now Hasidus comes here, so what's the response? What's the response when we live in a world that is trying to take away sanity, rational thought, get us caught up emotionally in what it is that the Yetzer Hara, the negative instinct, is trying to drag us in the wrong direction and makes us so passionate and so enthusiastic and excited, we lose our marbles, we lose our mind for the moment and we make a bad decision. What's the antidote to that? So a person could say, the antidote is take out the emotion, take out the passion, talk rationally. And Hasidus says that the only way we can answer this shtus, this foolishness, the spirit of folly that wants to draw us down, is to aspire to go up with the spirit of folly. And the Gemara tells us about a Hanin le'shtuse the Rebbe. There was a certain great sage who passed away, and a column of fire went up from his grave. And the Gemara comments on what was his greatness, and there were different interpretations as to why he was so great. But one of them was that he danced in front of a bride, juggling myrtle leaves, stems. And he was a great, righteous, knowledgeable tzaddik, a great, knowledgeable person. And there he was, behaving like a clown to make the bride happy. And the Gemara says, Ahanele, shtuse, the Rebbe. This rabbi, you know what stood him by that gave him this distinction? That when he passed away, this fire color went up from his grave that showed everybody this was a unique human being. He went the extra mile. He was passionate beyond the norms. He didn't just do what had to be the limit of the law. He didn't respond with a rational approach to a world that is irrational. This is a whole new take. You know, when people call guys that look like me with beards and black hats and they say, he's a fanatic. What does a fanatic mean? I'm a shugana. He doesn't act normal. If he'd at least be normal, he'd look like one of us. He'd walk in a way, he wouldn't be so excited about running to do a mitzvah and going crazy. Just act normal. And for all of us that learned vectors in science, remember those? If you need to cross a river, and the river has a tide or a strong pull of current downstream, and you want to get straight across the river, and you aim directly across the river. You swim perpendicular to the side of the river. You swim straight across. Where you're going to land up before you get to the other side. You're going to land up with a combination of your efforts and the downstream motion, and you're going to land somewhere downstream. Definitely not across. Because when there's such a pull downstream, the only way you can get straight across is by swimming upstream. You've got to swim against the current. So Hasidus speaks about shtus de kedusha. There is a folly, a foolishness, which is associated with a commitment and a determination to do a mitzvah that transcends the mind. What is the response to a world in which we are taken down from being rational, to behave in a way that's sub-rational, that's below the mind's capacity? We don't evaluate. We're not objective. We're caught up in the emotion. What's the answer? Not to take out completely the emotion and say, okay, so now I'm just going to go with the straight edge of the law, because you're going to land up downstream in an environment which is passionately insane, lower than the rational. We need to respond by being passionately involved in that which is good, passionately involved in a way that transcends the rational. The same shtus, the same folly, the element of not being defined by the objective, rational, technical requirement of the law. If you want to pull me to act passionately in a way that I'm not thinking, I'm going to act in a way that is not thinking but transcending of thought. I'm going to defy thought and act in a way that is much higher and way beyond. If anything we can take out of this week's portion is the story of the Saita woman, the woman who is warned by her husband. The commentaries, and we aren't able to get there tonight, speak about the husband might be also over-ambitious and over detailed by law, that he actually creates a problem in the family as well. The husband is a problem too. But the woman is an analogy, becomes the analogy for the wife of Hashem, which is our people Israel. We're all married to Hashem. Hashem says don't. And yet we start cutting corners and behaving in ways that are irrational. The antidote to that is to be passionate about our Judaism, to be excited about our Judaism, to sing and to dance and to enjoy and to buy a mitzvah from the best of our tefillin. You know, if we have a world that tells us that we should spend all of our money on things that are not necessary in our homes, the way we dress and the way we drive cars and the way we go on holidays, to indulge way beyond our means. So use that element for good. Next time we're buying a pair of tefillin, don't think that, why is this guy such a mashugana to spend so much money on a pair of tefillin? This is the meaning of his life. He wants to do it with the most passionate, excited, committed way, transcending the rational thought. So we're reaching the hour of 7:45, and we have a beautiful share that's going to begin now with Rabbi Simpson. So I'm going to hand over to him. I will send out a recording of the share. I'm going to start the sharing, so I can say goodbye to everyone. Thank you, Rene, all the way from Durban. Selden, thank you, Chava, Peter, Leah, Howard, thank you for being there. Neil, Felicity, Aviva, that's nice to have you with us. Joy, Barry, iPhone, I'm not sure if I know anyone with that name, but I don't know who it is. Beulah, Evie, thank you, Adelaide. God bless, have a beautiful week and a good Shabbos.
Thank you.